Hi, and welcome to our Kickstarter Creator Hangout with music creator Anna Vogelzang. I'm Molly Newman. I'm the head of music at Kickstarter, and I'm excited to talk to you, Anna. Thank you for taking the time in your busy week. This is the release week of Anna's new record, Hiker.
Yeah.
And so we are really excited that you could take a little time with us and talk to us about the process and what you're working on and how you're approaching your career in general, but your project specifically. We really use these as a way to inspire other creators, especially in the music category, to think about how they can use the Kickstarter platform in different ways. And so thank you again for taking time.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I've been lucky enough to work with you over the past couple of months. We had a great panel at South by Southwest that you were able to join us on, and your insight was really valuable, and I really appreciated the fact that you really are sort of in charge of your career and running it in a really thorough and detail-oriented way that I think is really inspiring for artists right now. So many people have to take things into their own hands. I'd love it if we could just start a little bit with how you first started writing songs and what your approach has been as you sort of decided that you were going to be a musician for your career.
Yeah, well, writing songs was, I think a lot of people come to writing songs out of necessity. It's like, I got to get this out of me.
Right.
And so, like most people, I started writing when I was a teenager. It was very cathartic and therapeutic. And
who was your first inspiration for as a?
The reason I asked for a guitar was Jewel. So I remember asking for Christmas for a guitar because I wanted to learn how to cover Jewel songs.
Right. Awesome.
And then I found out you had to have short fingernails, and so I put the guitar in my closet for 2 years. I was like, I had acrylics at the time. It was that's what, 7th or 8th grade, and then took it out beginning of high school, and then right around that time it was Anais DiFranco and Fiona Apple, and that was really kind of women singer-songwriters were. I was like, oh, this is the way to do this, and so for a lot, I was in every possible singing thing that I could be. And it was also a vehicle to use my voice because singing was really my thing. And I never thought I'm a songwriter. I was I'm a singer.
Right.
And so, it went from I was really involved in school, and I had a rock band in high school and did a cappella and all these things. And then I went to school for music. And so when I went to school for music was kind of the moment when I was like, oh, okay, this is maybe a thing I can do with some legitimacy. And then I made 2 records when I was in school, and I had all these friends who were kind of DIY touring at the time. And that was my insight into kind of what it would mean to be your own boss. I'm good friends with Amanda Palmer and the Dresden Dolls, and they took me on tour as their merch girl and backup singer. And so there were a couple shows with them where, it was oh, this is what it's like. I was, I was a freshman in college. It was this is what it's like to be in the van and sell merch and play at weird punk basements that nobody's here. And it was really at the beginning.
Yep.
And so that, I think I had for a long time, I was like, oh, that's all it has to be.
Right.
And then, a couple of years of touring DIY, I was like, okay, something's got to change a little bit.
Enough sleeping on the floors to, yeah.
So, but it kind of shifted for me out of a place of necessity. And I think a really natural thing that a lot of kids and teenagers experience of this is the thing I do. I make music. I've always made music. And then trying to see how you can really make that, into a life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you approached the approach was, I'm a singer. I have a voice and I want to use it to express different things. And the songwriting came from there. And as a guitar player, how did that evolve? So
I was terrible for a very long time.
As you should be, right?
As we all are. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I was totally self-taught. It was looking up tabs of things on the internet. And then in college, I was there to study voice, but I ended up creating my own major, a synthesis of different things. So I was still studying classical voice. So I was doing opera.
What school was it again?
Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
Yeah. So I went there for opera, and I kind of did the first year, and I was like, this is not what I want to do.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it as a vehicle for learning about the voice. I just I knew that I didn't want to like go to grad school for opera and then try to do competitions. And I have a lot of friends from my class who are super successul, but it's like, you need to want it. You need to like really want it.
Right.
And
you cannot phone that in.
Yeah, at all. It's too much. It's too crazy and hard. And, but I feel really lucky that I got to kind of keep doing that. And so I kept the classical voice component, but then I added a jazz guitar component. And then I also added, history, creative writing with a poetry, thing,
cool.
Focus, and then sound recording engineering, because they had a minor. And then I basically said, okay, I'm still going to do recitals the way you would if you're a voice major, but I'm also going to make 2 records, and that's going to be my senior thesis, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I made 2 albums before I graduated undergrad.
So, I mean, obviously your instincts throughout since you were, even a preteen, have been around like, how can you be in charge? How can you sort of, if you will, I'll use a Marxist theory, own the means of production, through your skills. So writing, recording, all of things. And that's pretty consistent theme through what you've done until this record. So you made 2 records when you were in college, and you recorded them and probably made some CDRs and shared them.
I got them actually, like, you did. Oh yeah. I did the whole thing. What's funny? I was thinking about this today with Kickstarter, because it was like, how'd you kickstart your first album? But my first album, which I made my sophomore year of high school, I actually totally crowdsourced the funding for it.
Right. Just on your own.
Yeah. Like Amanda Palmer, I remember and this was like email people, and then they would send me checks in the mail.
Right.
And it was like $1,000, and I didn't have any money, and
huge,
family and friends. And that's how I got my first CD pressed. And I got, 1,000 copies from CD, whatever those people, disc makers or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
And then so then when I went on tour for the first time after college in 2007, I had 2 full, like professional albums that I was like, you can buy both of my records.
That's awesome.
So, and I don't know. I never realized that I was so business minded about it until like you look back and you're like, oh, 10 years ago, that was probably, that was an interesting move that I made to like create my own major where I had to fulfill this. I kind of did like a self-fulfilling thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great part of the story. And then, so you made your 2 records, and then when you just were starting to make Canary in the Coal Mine, Kickstarter existed. So you then had a platform to maybe sort of pull together the support that you created through the people that had always your friends and family, and then the people that you'd met on tour. So, I mean, what was the path of, setting that up? And I'd love to hear, between Canary in a Coal Mine and Hiker, sort of what changed, how you approached it differently. I'd love to hear a little bit about that process.
Yeah. Well, the first Kickstarter was in 2011, and in 2010, I just looked it up before this, because I was like, I wonder when that was. It was July of 2010. I don't know when Kickstarter started.
2009.
Okay. So I had not heard of it until July of 2010.
Right.
And a friend of mine.
That's pretty early, actually.
Yeah, I know. And a friend of mine she funded buying a new laptop because she got this artist residency in Germany, and she does animation, but she needed to, she didn't have a computer to go do this. So she got into this thing, but she's like, but in order to do it, I need a computer. And she shared it on whatever it was, Facebook or MySpace. And I was like, this is awesome. And I got super into it, and I was like, this is really cool. I wonder but at the time I was actually on a record label. So I had put out an album before Canary with this label, and it's a local label in Madison.
So you've had 5 albums total.
I think Hiker's 7.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So I had 2. No, that's fine. It's fine. It's confusing because some of them are EPs. So there was like 2 after college, 2 in college. 1 I made by myself. That was like handmade, printed, that kind of thing. And then Paper Boats was with this album record label here in Madison, and it's like pretty small, but they had a distribution deal and fronted some of the money. They fronted all the money to get the albums pressed and things like that. So I was like, this is great. And then I was going to make another record with them, with Canary, and they changed their terms and they stopped doing physical distro. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and to their credit, they basically said like, hey, look, of all of the artists on our roster, you're actually like out there doing it, because it's mostly local people who play at home. And they were like, we know that you could do all of these things by yourself now, because you can do your own digital distro. You can do, the biggest thing they were offering me was physical, and they were like, we're cutting it. So if you want, we'll give you back all of your masters, and you can, but at the time I already had the studio time for Canary booked, and they were going to pay me, they were going to front $5,000 to make that record. And he was like, but then you won't have the funding. And I literally remember saying to him, $5,000. Oh, I can make that on Kickstarter. And he was like, okay, great. And I was like, let's do it. Done. And so for me, it was really, it was a huge necessity, because I had the studio time booked, and it was in New York. I made the album in New York, and I had all these musicians lined up, and everything was planned. And then there was like, but I need to be able to pay for it now. So,
and you knew, based on the sort of the audience that you had been cultivating through playing shows, that you could sort of count on a certain number of people.
It was more than I expected, or I don't know if that's quite true. There were people who showed up that I didn't expect to show up. There were people who didn't show up that I was surprised didn't.
Right.
And then
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's something we don't think about too much on our side of things at Kickstarter, is, when you're estimating your audience and trying to come up with your goal and what's, going to be successful, thinking about the challenges of people who are like, you thought you could count on.
Oh yeah. I mean, huge. And like, honestly, I had one angel investor on Canary who did like the highest level you could do. And I had never met him. He found me through Kickstarter, like through multiple friends of mine. There was like this network of people doing Kickstarters at the time.
Awesome.
And he and I had talked to a couple other friends where I was like, who's this guy? And people were like, oh yeah, he's just awesome, and like has money and backs records, and so I met him, and then I ended up like doing a house show for him out in New York, and he's been one of my biggest supporters now. And like, without the platform, I wouldn't have ever met him, that wouldn't have happened. So there was that. And then I also knew, I have a huge family. My dad is one of 7, and then I have like 32 cousins. So like, I just knew that if in the worst case scenario, somebody would bail me out, you don't want to rely on your parents to bail you out, but it's one of those things where I was like, I'm going to try this. And then worst case, like, I have to call my grandma and be like,
but it's a good point too, because one of the things that I think about when I'm talking to creators and people in the music community is, that you're always, whether you have someone release your record for you or you're putting it out yourself through a platform like Kickstarter, you're always sort of asking for support. I mean, you share that the record's released through Facebook or your newsletter or an email to your grandmother or whatever it is, you want them to be supportive. This is just a way for them to be directly so, and to really be a part of the process in a way that is so meaningful. For them to be able to connect with you as you're recording and being a part of that whole trajectory is really exciting and motivating to both parties, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I think it works, and it works for me. It's, I always feel pretty self-conscious asking for money, and we all do, right?
We get that. Yeah, it's awkward.
And my uncle is actually he's a public radio. He is the head of Maine Public Broadcasting, and
so he's got the pledge drive always.
He's like, it's my job to talk to donors. And actually, on this campaign, I approached it pretty differently. For Hiker, yeah. So for Hiker, a couple of things happened between that. I also released an EP between Canary and Hiker, as all on my own dime, as kind of like I knew that I was going to have to do a pledge campaign for the next big record, so I wanted there to be something else out there in the meanwhile. But I was hesitant to do another one because I was like, I just already asked you guys for money. But a friend of mine was like, yeah, but that was 5 years ago, and you've been on tour for 5 years.
Right.
Like, you have new fans who didn't know who you were then, who want to support you. And I hadn't thought about it that way, because it's like, I feel like I'm going back to the well every time. But it's like, no, there are lots of new people. And then my uncle, public broadcasting guy, was like, you have to learn how to ask for money no matter what your business is. And it's passing the plate. Like, you just have to say, this is where I'm at. And he actually was really helpful to me. One of the things that I did differently on this campaign was I targeted big donors that
Mm-hmm.
I had from my previous Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few other people that I knew, kind of super fans, if you were, that I've
Sure.
met in the meantime. And I either, depending on my level of comfort with them, I called them on the phone instead of just emailing. And I just said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. This is what I'm doing. And my uncle really talked me through how to do that ask.
That's so cool.
Which it was great. And it was very business oriented. And a lot of those people are family members, clearly. Like, that's just how it goes. And
yes.
And I tried really hard to approach that too with this business. Like, I know I'm just talking to good old Uncle Bob, but I gotta like do the, I gotta do the thing. And some of them passed, which was really hard actually, because I had really kind of hoped for, and I wasn't asking them for a specific number, but I kind of said like, here's the benchmark. I'm hoping for something over this.
Right.
And, a couple of them were like, yeah, it's just not a good time, or they gave me, I asked them for $1,000 and they gave me 50, something like that, like where the ratio is very different. And so
you're like, how am I going to get that?
It was actually really scary for a while there, because I was like, oh, well, I'm sure I can, when I was trying to figure out this new goal and how was I going to get more people involved, it was like, okay, what I was trying to do the math in my head, and really what it came down to was like, that was my bare bones budget. It was, I needed $20,000 to make the album, and I knew that. And it was like, okay, and then I had my ideal budget, which was like 40.
Right.
And it was like, I'm going to ask for the least amount that I need so that, I get basically, so that I know I have that in the bank. And then if we stretch goal, that's great. And if we don't, whatever. And so when I was kind of looking at the number, I was breaking it down, like, how is this going to happen? And, and a lot of it was those kind of, not even that big of a donor, but just like, a couple higher level people.
Right.
The other thing that I did that was interesting, which I think was interesting, which, a friend of mine runs a company called the Void Academy, which is a new, they do webinars, and it's helping artists reach the void of the internet. So they have, they're really fantastic. And my friend runs that company, and she ended up kind of coaching me through this, because she actually ran Marina Abramovic's Kickstarter.
Oh, cool.
She was her campaign manager for that. So she she's like,
she knows a lot of the nuance of
exactly.
a campaign when something maybe.
Yeah. And she pointed out, she was like, and I think it's a statistic from you guys actually, but it's, I think it's, 95% of campaigns that reach the 50% goal make it.
Yeah.
It's like, once you reach that thing, it's kind of like, okay, you're in the clear. So my goal was to hit 50% on the first day.
Right.
And I was like, that's what I want. So when I asked people to back, I was like, and this is the day it's launching, and I would really like you to back it on that day.
Yes.
And I don't think we made it to 50, but it was something like 45 or something.
But that momentum is one of the keys to it's not necessary for success, but it is something that gets the energy going, that helps the community of support know that the project will have some legs and is, I think the supportive community is there, they may be there for you regardless, but they really want it to be successful too. So, I think it's all of these sort of little indicators and data points are helpful to, both sides, to you as the creator and to the people who are backing it, to know that there's energy, and then that they can share it, and, all of those things. It's really wonderful. I mean, when I looked at your number, and it's interesting to hear, from you that you obviously, we could have used more than you were than you raised, but you still tripled the amount based on your first project. And since it was 5 years between, it was, I assume, the touring and sort of the maintaining of your network and your social media support and newsletter. I mean, what are the kind of tools that you have and how do you approach that connection with the people that are your fans? Yeah,
well, a lot of it too was the networking at conferences that I do. So it was, even if that means that, like, I mean, I reached out to fellow musicians, people that I had supported, and also that I said, hey, here's a 4-track preview of this record. This was a week before. And I said, can I just count on you to share this campaign when it launches?
That's really smart.
That added to the, that plus the asking bigger donors to back on day one made day one really pop. And then basically.
And these are all things you didn't know for your first campaign that you learned
no.
from experience.
My first campaign was a little bit of a mess. I mean, it was like I launched it. What I didn't realize was good on that first campaign is I launched it on my birthday, and everybody's on Facebook on your birthday.
Right.
So I was like, I want to give my birthday present.
Well, that's a trick. That's a good trick.
I didn't even mean to. It happened. And then the other thing was that I was on tour the month for Canary. I was on tour that whole month. And so I every night would talk about the Kickstarter in a different city on stage. And then at the merch table, I would say, no, go home and do this on the internet. And then that was a huge part of it too.
That's interesting because I know sometimes that sort of distraction can be challenging for some people who are running their projects. You know, that's like,
I wouldn't recommend being on tour while you do a Kickstarter campaign anymore. In fact, it took me about 2 months to do all the prep work that I did. My friend Sienna really helped me organize my thoughts, which was
for
like
hiker.
Yes, for hiker.
Mm-hmm.
It was about a 2-month process of prep and that for me, I dug through other Kickstarter projects that I had back that did really well. And I tried to look at things that they did. So for me, I knew the branding of my photos on my story page was important. And I knew that like
the story is important.
Yeah, the story itself was important. And I thought really hard about like I wrote my narrative story part. I mean, I edited it and rewrote it and was really worked on it because I wanted to know what I was trying to say also. You know, it's like,
well, I think that's something that I've been in my role here as head of music for 5 months. I started in January. So every day I'm learning more about, what helps our campaigns get to the greatest success and what, our team can do to help. And it's really true that when you see a project come in that has a story, but they're not telling it, what we're really trying to do is help get our creators into the best possible place. So, giving them the heads up that, we know there's more here. Or what tools do we have in our arsenal and our team to help these things become more robust? And we have 600 plus projects live at any given point in music. But there's certainly ones that we say like, oh, that's great, but we just need a little bit more of images or something. So it's great to hear that you knew that on your second one.
And that for me was just by looking at other people's who had been successful, I spent a day, I wrote them down in my notebook.
Market research, right?
Yeah, I wrote down people's tiers that I liked. Like I was like, oh, I like this number of tiers and I like this. Right. I like this spacing. I like 25, 30, 50 better than I like 15, 10, whatever. Nice. I really thought a lot about it and I took the time before I launched because I really wanted to be super on top of it. And then basically in terms of back to getting in touch with all of those fans and what I did to kind of keep them engaged, that was social media clearly. And that even social media in the last 5 years has changed so much. So it was much easier to get in touch with people. I individually emailed all of the artists that I was saying I asked them to share it more than I asked them to pledge. And then some did both and some only shared and some did nothing. And that's how that goes. But I individually emailed, I made a list of kind of different communities in my life. So it was, and that was on the suggestion of my friend Sienna at the Void Academy. It was like, who's in your musical network, like people you tour with? And then who's in your South by Southwest and Folk Alliance network that you feel like you could let them know that you have this thing happening? Not even you don't have to pledge if you don't want to, but I just want you to know, be aware. Mm-hmm. I wrote and then it's family members, people from undergrad, people from the community in Madison, people who book shows. I just tried to kind of categorize all of the people in my life.
I've been there telling you
a bunch of emails.
Just hearing you, it's so funny because I think people who even work in the industry of music sometimes feel that they don't have transferable skills. And I'm sure that, musicians could also feel like, if this doesn't work out, what do I do? I'm going to tell you that you could probably have a strong career in business development. Okay. Because you approached it with a real, mind for how, what are all the pieces that make this work? It's not just coming out of the ether.
And it's not just one thing. That was the biggest thing too. It was it's not, I can't just, I feel like people use Facebook so much. It's I'm just going to post about it on Facebook. It's well, it's so hard to reach people and it's so difficult. And so it was I knew that I had to individually email. I mean, I think I did 400 individual emails, something crazy the week of the launch. And then, individuals. And then I tweeted and I had my mailing list. I messaged all of the Canary Kickstarters on the Kickstarter platform, of course, and said,
reusing the platform. Right.
Yeah. And that got me, because there were people on there that I didn't know that haven't really stuck around with me. Like maybe they pledged $10 and then they repledged $10 on this one, you know, and that was great too. And then I just asked for help. I asked all of the musicians I know to post about it.
And you used Concert Window, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. So that was, I had 2 live events. One was in person, and that was like a launch party here in Madison, because I wanted there to be the only way to get, not the only way, but one of the best ways to get press in Madison is to do a live show. And that's they can't write an article like Anna's doing a thing on the internet. Really, they're like, hey, Anna has this show, and it's because of this thing on the internet.
That's a good tip.
So, yeah. So I thought that was really helpful, and I did it as a launch. So it was a couple days after. It was 3 days after the launch. So if you had backed online, then you got in for free, and if you hadn't, then you could bet. We had 2 laptop stations there, and it was like we're asking for $10 cash, or you could back the project here on the computer, and then all the cash went back into the Kickstarter. Nice. So, and then I did multiple sets, and it was like a brunch show. There were tacos. It was, you know, I knew a thing.
That is so great. Yeah.
And then Concert Window, I wanted to do something that I could include everybody that wasn't in Madison. And I knew I wasn't going to tour, because I was really, honestly, it felt like the Kickstarter was my full-time job that month. And so the Concert Window, I scheduled it towards the end of the campaign, and it's a platform like this. I mean, it's a online concert platform. And I had intended to actually have it be like, you know, pay this, and then I'll do a show, and then all the money that you pay me will go to Kickstarter. But Concert Window takes a fee when you do a show. And it also made it that there was a curtain. Like I wanted it to be accessible. So what I did was I made it free. I messaged all of the backers, and I said, hey, I'm doing this free show. Please invite your friends. Like anybody who you think might like the project, please tune in, join me. And then there's a tip thing on Concert Window, like a platform, and so people tipped within the platform, but then during the show there's also a chat, and I had my chat moderator basically be like, don't tip here, go here, go to the Kickstarter, like just kept pressing the link. And I've actually talked with Concert Window about trying to like integrate things so that there could just be a link where you click or whatever. And what ended up happening, funnily,
we should talk to them about that too.
Yeah, I will totally set it up. But what was interesting about that show was I didn't get tons of new backers, but I did get a lot of my backers to increase their pledges.
Right, they increased and probably shared the project, the campaign again, and you know,
it was like a last little hurrah before, and we weren't at the goal at that point. I think we were at like 80% or something like that. So it was a great last push, and it was you know, people can request. They're like, I'll up my pledge if you play this song. They're like, done, you know.
I love it.
And it was great. I think we raised like $500 in one night. It might have been more than that. So,
that's so cool. I mean, we're almost done. So I just want, you know, the campaign was about Hiker, and Hiker comes out on Friday. So yay, congratulations. I know I loved seeing the photos of you like sending your rewards out. And I mean, you just finished a few dates in advance. What are you doing? You know, how can our creators who are, you know, watching this, and the Kickstarter community, how can they continue to support you now? You know, just love a last word from you on I'm on the internet. We're all on the internet. We are on the internet.
Right now, it's happening. But I'm going to be on tour at the end of this month. I'll be in the South. So I'm going to be down in Nashville and Atlanta and Asheville, and down to Texas, Austin and Dallas and Denton. And then in July, I'll be on the East Coast. I'm playing in New York at Rockwood too. And I'm playing in Boston at Club Passim, and have couple other dates around there, and that's at the end of July. And then so I'm just kind of touring the rest of this year, like on and off, spending some time at home. And then I don't know where the fall is going to be like, but hopefully a West Coast tour behind Hiker. Great. And just more shows, but with the band, and trying to get the album to as many people as I can. I'm really proud of it. So, well,
we're really proud to have had you as a 2-time creator. It's a special category for SI Music. It's something that we're hoping to be, you know, continue to be more of a resource for our music creators, and you know, help them throughout their the life cycle beyond just the, you know, the crazy 30 to whatever, how many days you want to have your campaign be. So, you know, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you had to drive home this morning from a show in Minneapolis last night. So your commitment to us is huge, and we really appreciate it. And we're really pulling for this record to be a success, you know, in every way. So
thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And we'll see you here in New York when you come through at Rockwood. And yeah, we'll just the Kickstarter music team will be following you.
Thank you so much. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.